RESTlet script in NetSuite. Let's create a RESTlet script using our Visual Studio Code. Just right click on any folder, and then the bottom you can see the option of create SuiteScript file. I'm going to click on this create SuiteScript file, and then I'm going to select as RESTlet. I'm not going to use any of these modules. I'm going to click OK. Provide some name for this. So I'm going to say, so it has created my RESTlet basic syntax for this RESTlet script, which is in version 2.1. And if you clearly notice, it has 4 different entry points starting from get entry point, put, post, and a delete entry point. So there are 4 different entry points for this RESTlet script. So now let's have a look at this particular get entry point in this RESTlet script, which has an argument called as request parameters. So these parameters are coming from HTTP request URL, and the function or the definition says function that is executed when a get request is sent to RESTlet. So we will see what is this definition means when it comes and all those things. And this get entry point returns, or we have to return something like a string or an object, and it depends on the content type which we select in the application where we call this particular RESTlet. We will see what is this response or the return statement or the request params in detail going forward. So within this get entry point, I'm going to add one single line called as log.debug, which is going to log it in my execution logs, where the title says get request triggered, and in the value I have made JSON stringify API in order to stringify this request parameters which I receive for this get request call. So why did I stringify this? Because the parameter would be coming in as an object. So I have stringified this just to see the result in our execution log. So as this method says, we have to return something as a string or an object. So I'm going to return a string. So I'm going to return the response as successful get request. So now I have successfully uploaded this particular RESTlet script file to my NetSuite account. So let's create a script record for our RESTlet script. In order to do that, I'm going to navigate to customization, scripting, scripts, and then I'm going to click on new. I'm going to select my file. And then I'm going to click on create script record. I'm going to provide some meaningful name for this script, RESTlet script, and an ID for this RESTlet script. I'm going to save the script record. So on the script record, we can see all 4 entry points has been recognized from the script record, starting from get till put, post, and delete. And let me click on deploy script. So I'm going to provide some ID in the script deployment record. As of now, status, I'm going to leave it as testing, log level as debug, and then I'm going to click on save. So now I have successfully saved this deployment record. If you clearly notice, even this script deployment record, similar to our SuiteScript, it did not show any options for our applies to, where we saw this applies to option in our user event script and client script, where we used to apply those kind of script under any records like sales order, customer, something like that. But this particular script or the RESTlet script does not have an options to applies to, but it actually provided you 2 different URLs. One is internal URL and the external URL. So similar to SuiteScript, can I make use of this internal URL in order to access my RESTlet scripts? So let's give it a try. So I'm going to click on this internal URL of the RESTlet script. So it says successful get request, and I can see the response in my browser URL. And if I just go to script deployment, and if I just click on execution log and refresh, I can see the request has been made, and we have received the response as successful get request. So we tried this internal URL and it successfully responded back. What will happen if I use this external URL? Before I use this external URL, if you just have a look at this internal URL, we are able to access this RESTlet script as an internal URL without any problem, because we have already logged into our NetSuite accounts. So if I just open the field help of external URL, now let's just concentrate on our RESTlet script URL. If you are deploying RESTlet, this URL can be used for external access to this RESTlet, but only for logged in users. So if I try to use this particular external URL in my browser, and if I just copy and paste it in my browser URL section, will it allow me to access this external URL? So let's give it a try. So I'm going to paste this URL in my browser URL section, and then I'm going to click on enter, and it says invalid login attempt. So why it did not allow me to access this external URL when I try to open this within my browser, which I already logged into NetSuite account? Before you understand what is this RESTlet script in NetSuite, you should know what is REST
What is REST? Let's imagine you are in a restaurant. The customer places an order for food with the waiter. The waiter receives the order and communicates it to the kitchen. The kitchen prepares the food and delivers it to the waiter, who then delivers it to the customer. Similarly, in the world of web development, the client is an application or a user, and the server is a computer that stores data and responds to requests from the client. In this case, the communication between the client and the server is through a REST API. The REST API acts as a waiter who takes requests from the client and communicates them to the server. The client sends an HTTP request to the API, which includes information about what the client wants, such as getting data or updating a resource. The API then sends the request to the server. The server, which acts as the kitchen, processes the request and sends a response back to the API. The API then forwards the response back to the client, like a waiter bringing your food to your table.
So you guys would have understood this, what is REST. So what is this RESTlet script in NetSuite? So this RESTlet script in NetSuite is a script which actually allows you to build some RESTful web services within NetSuite platform, and this can be used for integrating NetSuite with your external systems, where you can exchange the data between NetSuite and your external system using this HTTP requests. So now you would have understood what is REST and what is RESTlet script in NetSuite. So as per our example, so let's say we have some external system as Salesforce or something else, and you want to connect that Salesforce with NetSuite. So in between, we're going to make use of REST API as per our video which I showed you. So this URL will act as a REST API, and as of now, I don't have any access to a Salesforce account. So I'm going to make use of a third-party application like a POSTMAN in order to test my RESTlet script. And here my client will be NetSuite, and my external system, let's say as of now, it will be my POSTMAN, since I'm going to make use of POSTMAN to test this RESTlet script, and the REST API will be external URL. I'm going to make use of this POSTMAN application. You can download this POSTMAN and install it in your system. Once you have successfully installed your POSTMAN, open the POSTMAN application, and on the left hand side you can see an option called as create new collection. So I'm going to click on this plus symbol, and I'm going to click on blank collection, and I'm going to provide some name for this collection, let's say test. And once I add that name, and below that collection itself I can see an option of add a request. So I'm going to click on add a request. I'm going to provide some name for this request.
So let's say test get.
And by default you can see there is a method which got selected as get. Once you click on this drop down, you can see many methods. You can see many methods: get, post, put, patch, delete. But we're gonna just, so in our RESTlet script we have seen 4 entry points, which is get, post, put and delete. So I'm gonna leave it as a default, which is get. And even in our script we are just concentrating to test only our get method entry point. So I'm gonna make sure to set this as get method. So here if you see there is an option of providing the URL, enter URL or paste text. So I'm going to copy the external URL from my script deployment, and I'm going to paste it in this section. So once I paste this external URL, you can see this under params, it automatically adds 2 parameters, which is called as query parameters in POSTMAN, like script and deploy. If you see this URL where we can see this 2 query parameters, which is script equal to 326 and deploy equal to 1. As of now, these are the 2 parameters. So now that we have pasted our URL and we have provided a proper method as per our code, so I'm going to click send and let's see what happens. Now even here it says invalid login attempt. So as the script deployment mentioned in the field help of external URL, only for the logged in users. So this POSTMAN has no connection with our RESTlet script, so and that is the reason it says invalid login attempt. So first we have to provide some access to this external system. So in order to do that, I'm going to go back to NetSuite account. So we're going to make use of token based authorization in order to test our RESTlet script, which is also called as OAuth. So I'm going to navigate to setup, company, enable features. The reason why I'm navigating to enable features is we have to make sure at least this token base, we have to make sure this particular authentication has been enabled, which is token-based authentication. So I'm going to make sure this checkbox is checked, which is token-based authentication. And the role which I'm using in my account is administrator role. We are not going to test OAuth 2.0 as of now. We're just going to concentrate on token-based authentication, which is OAuth 1.0. I'm going to click save. So in order to provide access to my external system, I'm going to create an integration record. In order to do that, I'm going to navigate to setup, integration, and then I'm going to click on manage integrations and then click on new. So once you click on new, you should be able to see this particular page where you have to provide some name for this integration to your external system. I'm going to name it as Postman test. Since we're going to use only token-based authentication, which is OAuth, I'm going to uncheck OAuth 2.2. I'm going to uncheck this authorization flow. We are not going to make use of authorization flow of this token-based authentication. So I'm just making sure this token-based authentication is checked, and I'm going to click on save. So once I save this integration record, I can see that there are two tokens which appeared, or two keys which got appeared on the client credential sections, which is consumer key and client ID. So I'm going to copy and save it in my notepad. So before you copy and save it, just make sure to read this warning section. So now let's go to Postman, and I'm going to select or click on this authorization tab, and under type I'm going to select this as OAuth 1.0, which is nothing but token based authentication. The moment I select OAuth 1.0, on the right hand side I can see multiple fields which appeared where it says signature method. So I'm going to leave the signature method as HMAC SHA-256. Consumer key, we just have some data from our integration record, so I'm going to copy this consumer key value and paste it here. And let's copy the consumer secret key also and paste it in this field. It also requires two more tokens, which is access token and token secret. So I'm going to go back to NetSuite account. So if I just go to my dashboard, which is this particular page which I am already there, and if I just scroll down, I should be able to see the settings portlet. Under settings portlet, you should be able to see a manage access token. This appears only if you enable those token based authentication and if you are in administrator role. If you have a different role, make sure you have the permissions for this manage access tokens for this particular role. So I'm going to click on this manage access token, and under manage access token, I'm going to click new access token, and I'm going to select the application name which we just created, which is our integration record, which is Postman test, and I'm going to click on save. So once I save this, you can see there are two more keys, which is token ID and token secret. Make sure to read this warning message, and I'm going to copy this token ID and token secret, and I'm going to save it in my notepad. So now I have my token ID and token secret. I'm going to copy this token ID, and if I just go back to my Postman, and I'm going to click on authorization tab, and here I have this access token. I'm going to paste the token ID in this access token place. I'm going to copy the token secret value, and I'm going to paste it in the token secret place. And in the bottom, I have this advanced configuration. I'm going to expand this advanced configuration. Under this, I have multiple fields starting from callback URL till realm. And we have also few checkboxes. I'm going to leave it as default, but only for this realm section, I'm going to paste some value, which is my NetSuite account ID. So if I just go back to my NetSuite account, in order to get the account ID, I'm going to navigate to setup, company, and then I'm going to click on company informations. So under company information, I should be able to see this account ID field, which has the account ID. I'm going to copy the account ID and paste this account ID value in realm section. So if it is a sandbox, you may have something like suffixed with -sb1. I would suggest, if that is the case, to replace hyphen with _sb1 and paste it in your realm section. So if I just scroll up, here we have an option of add authorization data to. Make sure this is being selected to add it to request headers. And if I just scroll up, I think we are pretty much done with the setup. So signature method, let's leave it as HMAC SHA-256, and let's test our RESTlet script now. So I'm going to click on send. Now we have received a successful response with the code as 200 OK, and the response message says successful GET request. If I just go back to my script deployment, and if I just refresh my execution log, I can see I have my request being received. So this is my latest request. It says get request triggered, and we have the log. And if you see in the detail section, we have an empty object. And if I just go back to my code, here we haven't logged for our object, which is this request parameters. Right, as of now it's just being sent as empty. We don't have any request parameters. And if I just go back to my Postman, under params section, we can see this two query params, which is script and deploy. This is actually coming from the URL, but this is being ignored by NetSuite. So let's try to add our own query parameters. So let's say test. I'm going to pass it as D17339, and let's try to send the request now. And before I send the request, I will show you the URL. If you check this URL, you can see this has been appended in the URL. I mean, the query parameters has been appended in my URL as ampersand test equal to the value which I have provided. If I just uncheck this, you can see that that is being removed from the URL. If I just check this checkbox, it is being added to my URL. So I'm gonna send this request one more time freshly. Now I got the response as successful GET request. If I just go back to my NetSuite account and refresh the log in my deployment of my RESTlet script, and we have a successful request parameter value, which is test, and the value is D17339. If you have a look at the reading of this request parameters, which says parameters from HTTP request URL. So we have seen that in our Postman URL itself, this is being passed in the URL itself, and parameters pass an object for all supported content types. So as of now, we have written the response as a string. If you would have sent the response as an object, we have to make sure the content type has been set to application/JSON. So in order to set that, you have to go back to your header section, and then here you have to just type. If you just check this checkbox or just type something like content, you should be able to see an option of content type, and here you can paste the application/JSON if it is an object. Now we will see how to make use of our RESTlet script in order to perform the CRUD operations like create, read, update, and delete. So in our RESTlet script, we have just 4 different entry points starting from get, put, post, and delete. So here the post represents to create, get represents to read, put represents to update, and delete represents to delete operation. So let's see how to make use of all this entry point and perform all these operations. So now let's see the first entry point, which is post, which is nothing but create. So in our RESTlet script, we'll make use of this post entry point in order to create some record in NetSuite. So let's say this is a create operation for post.
The customer orders a hamburger that is not listed on the menu. The waiter receives the order and communicates it to the kitchen. The kitchen prepares the hamburger and delivers it to the waiter. Finally, the waiter receives the hamburger and delivers it to the customer.
So let's say we are going to create a customer record in NetSuite. So we're gonna make use of this post entry point. So I will add one log here so that it says post triggered, and I'm gonna log the request body which I'm going to receive in this post entry point. And since we're gonna create a record called as customer, I'm gonna paste an API called as record or create, where the type I'll receive from the request. So since it is a customer record, I need to provide the company name and the subsidiary. So I'm gonna set 2 field values. One is company name and the other one is subsidiary, and both of these values will be received from my request. So I'm going to set the value from my request body. So I'm going to do it as request body.name, and for subsidiary it will be request body.subsidiary. And finally I'm going to save this record using the API called save. Once we save this record successfully, we will send a response back to the postman. I mean, the ID is the customer ID which is getting saved in NetSuite record, and we will send a message to postman saying created successfully. So why did I set only set value for company name and subsidiary? So if I navigate to list, relationships, customers, and click on new, so currently in this new customer form, we just have only mandatory field as company name, and the other mandatory field is primary subsidiary. And by default, custom form is defaulted to SuiteScript's customer form. So other than that, nothing else is required as of now. So that is the reason only I have set company name and primary subsidiary when I'm trying to create a customer record using this post entry point. Since we are making use of record module here, so I'm going to declare this record module on top. So now let's upload this code to NetSuite and we will test it in our Postman. So currently in our Postman, we have completed the basic step for get. Now we are going to perform the post operation or the post entry point in RESTlet script. In order to do that, I'm going to click on this 3 dot next to this collection, and then I'm going to add a request. So if you see, the method is get, but in our RESTlets we're gonna perform a post request. So I'm gonna change this get to post. I'm gonna rename this new request to test post. And in this URL, we have to paste our RESTlet URL. So I can get it again from my script deployment. So I'm gonna copy the external of my RESTlet and paste it in this. Authorization wise, type, we know it's OAuth 1. The moment I select OAuth 1, you can see it has defaulted from my previous configuration for get request, so which all looks good for me. And headers, so under headers we will just add one option, which is content type as application/JSON. We are done with authorization headers, and now if you just look at our RESTlet script, we are just trying to receive the request body, which will contain the values of record type, name, and subsidiary. But if I just scroll up, if you have a note on this arguments, the request body, the HTTP request body is passed as a string when request content type is text/plain, or passed into an object when request content type is application/JSON. So it should be passed inside the body. So if I just go back to my Postman, here we have a body section. So I'm going to click on this tab, and here I'm going to select as raw. I'm going to choose the format as JSON. So in this body section, I'm going to pass the JSON content where it says record type, customer, company name, so and so, subsidiary 11. And this record type, the JSON key like company name, subsidiary, record type should actually match with your value which you're trying to fetch. Here, if you see, I am trying to fetch it as name, but I pass it as company name, so I'm going to rename this to name. Now let's try to send a request to our RESTlet, and let's see whether it creates our customer record. So I'm going to click on send. Now we have a response back from our RESTlet script, which says ID is 1983 and the message is created successfully. Now, how did I pass this record type value as customer and subsidiary as 11? Subsidiary ID is internal ID, which is 11. Record type is customer. If I just go back to my NetSuite account, so on this customer page, I have a plugin which is called as NetSuite Field Explorer. In this plugin, I can see the record type, the base record type is customer. So that is the reason I have passed the string as customer. Now let's check the list of customers. Here I can see the internal ID, which is 1983, and that matches with our Postman response 1983. And let's open this customer. We can see that the name has been set with what we have sent, and the subsidiary has also been set, and we have successfully created the customer record.
The customer orders a burger, and the waiter receives the order and communicates it to the kitchen. The kitchen prepares the burger and delivers it to the waiter, who then delivers it to the customer.
So I'm going to make use of record.load API in order to read the customer record. So I'm going to load that record, which is customer ID. By passing the customer ID, I'm going to load that record, and I'm going to send this object record. So by default, record.load returns the object record of that customer. So I'm going to return this object, which is obj record, and we will remove this return successful get request. And let's upload this code to NetSuite. So in this get entry point, we have the argument as request parameters, and this request parameters, we all know it will be part of the URL. So I'm going to pass this customer ID in my URL. So in my Postman, if I just go back to my get request, I'm going to try to add new query parameters called as customer ID, and let's try to pass the value as the one which we just created, which is 1983. So I'm going to pass this value here, and if I just click on the URL, we can see that this has been concatenated at the end of this URL as ampersand customer ID is equal to 1983. Now let's try to send a request, and now if you just clearly notice in the bottom, we have a response code of 200. We have received the complete information of the customer record using this get request.
The customer requests the waiter to update the previous order of a hamburger to be spicier.
A little bit.
The waiter receives the update request and communicates it to the kitchen. The kitchen prepares the hamburger to be spicier and delivers it to the waiter. Finally, the waiter receives the spicy hamburger and delivers it to the customer.
So if I just go back to my RESTlet script, and if I just go to the put entry point, here the argument is request body, similar to the post where we use the post operation to create. Now we're going to make use of this put to update the customer record. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna try to update this particular customer record which we just created, whose internal ID is 1983, where we will try to update some comments section and we will see how to do that. So I'm gonna add one log here which says put request triggered. Now I'm gonna make use of record.submit fields API since I'm going to update the body level field. So I'm gonna use this API called as record.submit field, which will update my customer record and the ID which I'm going to reserve it from my request body. So now once we have updated this customer record successfully, we will send the ID as a response back to the request. I mean the request from the postman. So we're gonna return the response. Let's say we're gonna send it as an object saying status success, message successfully update the customer with ID. This ID is nothing but this particular variable. This record.submit field API will return the ID of the customer record once it is updated. So let's upload this code to NetSuite and test it in our postman. So now in my postman, I'm gonna perform a new request. So I'm gonna click on the three dots, add a request, and we're gonna change this get to put. We're gonna paste our RESTlet URL here.
I'm gonna rename this request as test put update.
Now we are pretty much done. We are just left out with adding the body level. I'm gonna select the body type as raw, and this is to be JSON. And in our request body, we are expecting only the customer ID. So I'm going to just pass the customer ID value in my body. So in this postman body section, I'm going to add only the customer ID. I'm going to add only the customer ID, which looks like this. And we know the customer ID which we are trying to update is the one which we created. So 1983. So I'm going to add the value as
1983 here.
And if I just go back to our code, we are just going to update the comments field which says SuiteScripts. So I'm going to click send. Now it says successfully updated the customer with ID 1983. Let's check it in our NetSuite account. So if I just refresh this customer record, which is 1983, now we can see in our comment section, the value has been updated. And if I just scroll down and if I just click on the system information, we can see the context type which says script RESTlet.
The customer is not in the mood to eat a spicy hamburger now, so they request the waiter to cancel the order. The waiter receives the cancellation request and communicates it to the kitchen. The kitchen removes the spicy hamburger from the order and informs the waiter. The waiter receives the confirmation of the spicy hamburger cancellation and communicates it to the customer.
So what we're gonna do is we're gonna make use of the same customer record, and we will try to delete this customer record using our RESTlet script delete entry point function. So in my RESTlet entry point of delete entry point function, I'm just going to add one log. So I'm going to make use of the API called as record.delete, and the record.delete API looks something like this, where I'm going to pass the record type from my postman and also the ID from my postman. And once it successfully deletes, it is going to return me the ID of the record which it deletes. And I'm going to return that ID back to my postman. So in order to do that, I'm going to use the same response which we did before.
So I'm gonna return successfully instead of update, I'm gonna say just deleted the customer with ID. We're gonna pass this ID here.
And now let's upload this code to NetSuite and we will test it in our postman. Now I'm going to add a new request. And if you notice, it's not been changed to put. So I'm just going to save the previous request, which is put. Now you can see on the left hand side it has been updated. Now let's come back to our new request, which is delete. I'm going to change the method as delete. Let me click save so that it reflects on the left hand side. And here I'm going to paste the URL, authorization, headers and all those things. And do we need to do all this in each and every request, like providing an authorization, headers and a few parameters, the URL, all those things? So actually there is a multiple shortcuts in our Postman's tool. Now we have to pass the query parameters for this delete operation because the entry points which accepts is a request parameter. So I have to pass the record type and the ID. So I'm going to copy this record type and paste it here.
Then I'm gonna pass the record type as customer. And the other one is ID. I'm gonna copy this ID key and I'm gonna paste it in the key section.
And the value which we're gonna delete the customer is the one which we created, so which is 1983. And if I just go to this delete operation and I'll paste it here. Now this is the customer which we just created. So in the URL you can see the internal ID of this 1983. So I'm gonna refresh this customer record once we send the successful request from our postman. So let's go back to our postman Now I'm going to send the request for delete. Now we have received the response saying successfully deleted the customer with ID 1983. Now if I just go back to NetSuite account with that customer record, now if I just refresh this customer record, we can see that record does not exist. This is because we just deleted this record using our postman delete operation. So we have covered pretty much all the CRUD operations of this RESTlet script by using RESTlet. So one thing which I did not explain here is how did I arrive with all these APIs like record.delete, record.submit fields, record.create, all those things. If you are new to NetSuite, this is for you, or else you can skip this. So if I just go to Help Center in my NetSuite account, and if I just search for a record module, and if I just open the first link, which is n/record module, here you can pretty much find all the APIs which I used to create, like for example, record.create, and I have used load, and I have used save, and also submit fields. So here you can find all the API related data and what it returns and everything.